this isn't really from your CFO, or this is something that's in violation of policy, rather than relying on them to remember a training you delivered a week, a month, a year ago.
Hi, I'm Joan Goodchild, Editor-in-Chief of CSO, and welcome to another edition of Security Sessions, where we talk about trends and topics important to security managers. The latest trend in phishing is going after the folks at the top, the CFOs, the CEOs, and it's known as spear phishing. My guest today is Kevin O'Brien with GreatHorn, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about this trend and what makes the C-suite so vulnerable to spear phishing. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Joan.
Tell me a little bit about GreatHorn first.
Sure. GreatHorn is a cybersecurity solution that's based on identifying, through the use of machine learning and automation, exactly the kinds of attacks we're talking about today. Yep. Highly targeted threats that come in over cloud-based messaging systems like Google Apps or Office 365, or even new platforms like Slack.
And so when we're talking about phishing, specifically spear phishing, some data shows that as many as 90% of breaches have been the result of a targeted phishing attack. Not necessarily the CEO or the CFO, but generally, addressed to somebody who was able to get access to sensitive data. Why is this such a tactic that is so lucrative?
It's a good question. The biggest threat in any security program is never the infrastructure or the code, it's the people. If I can convince someone inside of an organization who has both the ability to do something, give me a password, wire money to me, open the door for me, and I can trick them into doing that because they are susceptible to some kind of social pressure. I can pretend to be an important business partner or an executive that they work for. Well, now I've got a way into that organization from an attacker's perspective. That's what spear phishing really is. It's a form of social engineering that happens to come in over email or other messaging technologies.
And so how's it changed over the years? Has there been something in the technology landscape that has led to changes? What have you seen in recent years with regard to this tactic?
Yeah, we started GreatHorn because we were watching a technological shift that really starts arguably almost a decade ago, which is the move to the cloud. And if you think about what that means for many businesses, it's only in the last 2 to 3 years that they've really, at the enterprise level, the Fortune 500, embraced things like cloud-based email systems, core line of business systems, not just development resources or infrastructure. And in doing so, they've benefited tremendously from availability, from security, from the ease of access for an executive. But they've also opened the door to new kinds of threats because all of the technology that over the last 15 or 20 years we've built up, on-premise security gateways and secure email technology that sits in a server room, very little of that applies to a pure cloud environment. Right. And so that's a change that we're now watching manifest itself in these spear phishing trends, because executives who are now traveling with personal iPhones or personal Android devices and tablets can be reached around the clock, anywhere in the world, and can be targeted by attackers who know exactly how to exploit those human weaknesses and get them to do things they shouldn't.
Now, there's certainly plenty of awareness programs out there available for corporations, and that is the way that a lot of organizations have decided to try to tackle the phishing issue. But we were chatting earlier, you said that's really not effective on its own. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with doing training. In fact, you should. However, Forrester Research did a report this year where they looked at the breach statistics from organizations that primarily rely on security awareness training. And to define that a little bit, these are simulated email attacks that are sent to users, and they typically involve clicking on a link, and if you do, a little gotcha message comes up. And organizations that did not invest in this technology, there was a 3-point spread, 48 to 51%, between organizations that did and did not rely on this as a training mechanism for securing themselves, and the resulting breach stats. That's within the margin of error for the research itself. So although we see organizations embracing secure training programs, we don't actually see it correlating to a decrease in their risk from being the victim of one of these attacks.
A lot of phishing detection differs from typical spam filter detection methods. How can a company reduce its phishing vulnerabilities simply by improving spam filters?
You really can't. So spam filtering is based on looking for generally keywords, Viagra in an email, let's say. Or it uses things like checksum technology, where you analyze whether or not a given message has been replicated with minor variations hundreds of thousands of times. Spam by definition, is broad-based. When I spam someone, I'm sending the same email trying to get them to go click a link or open an ad or something to that effect to potentially millions of people. Yeah. Spear phishing is targeted. Spear phishing, sort of the connotation is it's a very selected group of people inside of an organization, usually at the C-level, who are receiving messages designed to trick them. And so spam technology just isn't built to do this kind of analysis. And so Google or Office will give great spam filtering. They'll even give you very good antivirus and anti-malware. Some of the other reasons why people have, in years past, invested in gateway technologies is to stop that virus route. But it really does nothing when there's no URL to detect and there's no malware payload to stop.
So why isn't that part of the spam filtering technology? Why isn't it part of kind of that native protection level?
So there's a degree of it that we're seeing organizations start to implement. There are authentication standards over email like DKIM and DMARC that Google and Office now enforce, and this is a great move. But to really crack this nut, you need to think about this in terms of statistical analysis across a huge corpus of mail, looking very specifically for targeted attacks. And that is not the work or the responsibility of your email provider. It's really about your organization, your threat landscape, and your behavioral profiles so that you can build a system that is both automated but also customized to your risk.
Now, going back to kind of the original mission of what we were talking about, CEOs, CFOs, the C-suite being particularly vulnerable to spear phishing, what makes them so vulnerable? Is it their access to data? Is it because they are often allowed to opt out of certain security protocols? I mean, we talk about this issue a lot on the site, and I've heard a lot of different answers to that. What's your opinion?
So I received a spear phishing email about a week and a half ago. Specifically, we actually received one to our controller, and it impersonated me. And it looked just like my email address. Instead of greathorn.com, it was greathom with an m.com. Mm-hmm. This is visually similar enough that most people would be tricked. Why impersonate me? Well, as CEO, I'm one of the few people in the company who might actually say, please go do this wire transfer and mean it. Or if you actually manage to trick me, be able to go to our bank and set that wire transfer up. This is not the case for many executives, but at the C-suite level, you have that perfect combination of ability to execute a wire transfer if you're stealing money, or send out the W-2s of all of your staff if you're stealing personal information for tax fraud, and likely the access, because every executive carries a phone, is available via email all the time. We're in an always-on kind of world. And that marriage of availability and capacity is why these are the targets that we see spear phishers going after.
And what's the takeaway then again? Scrutinize those emails very closely, or?
Go a step further. Actually have a system that does that on your behalf. Yeah. The best defense is to take that executive's email and warn them, hey, this message, this isn't really from your CFO, or this is something that's in violation of policy, rather than relying on them to remember a training you delivered a week, a month, a year ago.
Right. All right, great. I want to thank Kevin O'Brien with GreatHorn for joining us today. And for more on phishing, spear phishing, and other topics related to social engineering and security awareness, check out CSO. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.